Hey, welcome to the 2-month review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take one giant book, break it down bit by bit, section by section, talk about it, laugh about it, do a lot of things. And I'm speaking really, really fast this season's book is The Remembered Part, The Monster of All Monsters, part of the trilogy by Rodrigo Fresán, translated from the Spanish by Will Vanderheiden. I am Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox.
Hello, Chad. Wow, you are talking fast. What was in your coffee this morning? You snort pre-workout or what's going on?
Yeah, dude. If I don't put cocaine in my coffee, it's not Coke coffee, which is what I think of as the ultimate drink available to you.
That's funny. I have my mug is brought to me by Mended Hearts and the American Heart Association. If you do a lot of cocaine, this will explode. So please be careful.
Keep it straight. Keep it on the straight. Keep it on the straight edge.
What does that mean?
It's something about braces. I don't know. It's not.
All right. Well, I should warn everybody just ahead of time. I'm not hungover because I think I might still be drunk. So should be a good show today. Should be a good show today.
I am after this show is over. We are doing this on Tuesday instead of our usual Wednesday because I leave for Iceland this afternoon, thinking all last week up until literally Sunday that I was leaving on Wednesday afternoon. So so I'm a little rushed. That's why I'm talking a little fast. Is I'm like, oh, I gotta finish packing, gotta get out of here.
I have a question for you about Iceland before we get into slaying monsters here. Which I don't think Rodrigo would call this a monster. I think he'd be more into kaiju. But
he refers to this as the monster.
The monster. Yeah. No, when you said monster of monsters, it made me think of like something Guillermo del Toro would come up with, like a giant weird Cthulhu. Yeah.
Cthulhu squared.
Yeah. No, but like I'm wondering, like when you think of Iceland, what are are there any like pop culture references or things that immediately come to mind for you that like if you put Iceland in its little box, like what is inside that?
I mean, aside from like the international one would be Bjork, obviously. Bjork, yeah. But I don't know that that's what I think of per se.
That's what I'm asking. Like, what is it for you?
For me, like right now, I mean, I'm super, super immersed for the past like month in like history and the writing of Iceland, especially like mid-century. Laxness is a huge one, and who's sort of undervalued in the American literary marketplace right now, which is weird. You know who else I would put into Iceland that will make no sense is Jane Smiley. Jane Smiley writes the intro for every fucking book about Iceland.
Really?
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
Everything. Saga of the Icelanders, various Laxness book. There's another one that I pulled open that I was reading. I was like, this intro sounds really familiar. And I was like, oh, it's Jane Smiley again. I don't know I don't know the connection. I wanted to look into it, but I thought it'd be funnier just to not know. The other thing that I think of in terms of not pop culture, I mean, Sigur Rós would be one, obviously.
Sure.
I have different taste. Like Olafur Arnalds is my favorite Icelandic musician, did the music for Broadchurch, is also like insanely young for the number of albums he's put out. But in terms of books, there's our Bragi Olufsen. There's also Gudbjörg Bergson, who we published the Thomas Jansson bestseller that was on here, which getting that ready to talk about for my lecture only encouraged me that now reading a lot of the sagas, reading a lot of the history, knowing a lot of like these different elements that I was always a little fuzzy on before. I really want to reread that book and listen to our podcast about it because it's so fascinating. But yeah, so that's my Iceland bit. I'm going to be on a plane. So this whole section that we read, pages 1 through 82, are really hit home last night in terms of plane life.
like for me, I typically, it's not pop culture, but like my first thought is like volcanoes and
also like, all Nordic myth is written down because of Iceland. Iceland wrote down all of what we refer to as like the Norse myths. Prose Edda is the story of Thor and Ragnarok and Loki and Freyr and
Odin. Like if you're gonna have a time capsule, that'd be a great place to put it. Aside from the geology trying to like wipe itself off of the face of the earth and recreate it in this primordial, like it has like this primordial feel to it.
So interesting enough, that we came up with two bits. I came up with one bit I haven't shared with you yet. But we did see last week Tucker Carlson's lashing out on YouTube where he just listed.
Does he have a new show? He said he has like a new show, right? That's going to be on Twitter or.
Fuck if I know. All I know is that there's an image of his YouTube video announcing his relaunch, and it's just list of enemies, and the list of enemies includes like Canada.
It's a random list.
It's like unsexy M&Ms. It's just like ludicrous. I would like to have a list of enemies.
I'll find your text.
At the start of our show, we should have a list of enemies.
List of enemies.
My enemy this week relates.
Can I say it real quick? Tucker Carlson posts cryptic video amid reports he was axed over texts. List of enemies. Bullet point 1, Canada. 2, low sperm counts. 3, the Seuss, like Dr. Seuss estate. And 4, unsexy M&Ms.
I love this. I love this bit. Like, I assume he's doing a bit. He might not be doing a bit, but regardless, it's a great bit. Like, those are great enemies.
Is the unsexy M&Ms about like what? Can we not like ascribe gender to our M&Ms anymore and have like a feminine M&M? Yeah,
he was the proponent that like, was it the yellow M&M wore high heels? One of them wore high heels. Yeah. He changed it to like high tops. And he's like, you're just making M&Ms unsexy. Like, why can't we even have sexy M&Ms anymore? And it's like, dude, you totally jerked off to that bunny Lola Rabbit in Space Jam one time too many. I don't know if that's slander, but I hope so. But my enemy this week is Alcoa. This is not a funny one. I just rewatched Dreamland, the movie based on the book by Andres Magnuson. Since I'm going to be seeing him, it's been years. The movie came out in like 2013-ish, maybe even earlier, maybe 2009. Anyways, it's about how Alcoa, giant American smelter and aluminum manufacturer, like basically raped Iceland for money and for profit, and took over created a huge dam that caused innumerable.
Slow your roll, Chad. I'm pretty sure Iceland is like loosely translated. Originally, it was called Rape Island. Like it's kind of what it was. Like if we go back far enough, can you just like stop with this like modern lens that you're going to be applying to everything and judging? Can you just like no, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Fuck Alcoa is they're making there's a lot of details to it, but basically they've created way too much energy that the island never needed and created and damaged the environment to be able to make so many aluminum cans that are being like stockpiled and not totally used, but like all the aluminum that they generate there is like unnecessary and just polluting everything. And they're so happy about their giant, massive plant. So fuck Alcoa. Alcoa is on my list of enemies. Do you have an enemy?
Yeah, I think my enemy then, just on the spur of the moment thinking about it, is I downloaded a calorie tracker on my phone.
No, don't do it.
And so I've been keeping a food diary of everything that I eat and how many calories it is. And there's no joy in my life now.
Yep. Calories are on the list of enemies. Calories are enemies.
Calories are the enemy. I'm literally like not eating salad so I can have an old fashioned because it's like, oh man, I got 150 left for the day. So
you don't count the booze.
Oh, that doesn't count. That's right.
No.
My enemy is whatever monster decided to create an easy to use calorie tracker so you can see what you're consuming.
It's horrible. Yeah, it is horrible.
Terrible idea.
I'm going right back into that as soon as I get back from Iceland. So I'll be The other bit that I want to do is they're talking about memory. This whole section, which we'll get into in more detail in a second, really has like kind of two settings. One is the desert and one is an airplane. But the main theme is memory and talking about like the invented part, the dream part, and then the remembered part, and how memory rules all these things. And ironically, I always use like a baseball card for my bookmarks, because I mean, I have bookmarks, but I also have baseball cards because my mom decided that they were going to move, and this is the one thing they could part with was like all these baseball cards. So I figure like each week I could have like a remember that guy moment related to which dude I have. Now this gets funnier and weirder. So this week I have Will Myers. He still plays, I think, but whatever. He was there this week. And so I opened up my big binder of baseball cards that my mom gave me. Turns out that it is the complete score set from 1991. Okay. Complete score. Flip it open to the first page. What do I find? A Sammy Sosa rookie White Sox card which is funny for anyone who knows baseball and Sammy Sosa. Now I was like, this is weird. So I put it into eBay. This is a typo card that has the wrong birth date on the back, and it sells for between $65 and $100. So Sammy Sosa is not going to be my bookmark, but instead I think this week, Ray Langford. I remember this guy. I used to love Ray Langford. I don't think he was ever good. I'm not even going to look.
I was going to say, I don't know if you've seen Sammy Sosa lately, but it's like, remember when Sammy Sosa looked like he was from the Dominican Republic?
I know. Remember Sammy Sosa wasn't in legal trouble all the time?
Yeah.
Poor dude. But anyway, so I got a card with maybe some money. I remember that guy. And Ray Langford, I remember because anyone who was a rookie around this time, I was like deep into. I was like, every rookie is going to be a superstar. I'm going to watch their career from beginning to end. And Ray Langford did not become that.
So very ironic that you said that this section's about deserts and airplanes, because my bookmark was a Ralph Fiennes rookie card. Did you ever watch the movie The English Patient? Speaking of airplanes in the desert.
I did not, to be honest.
You didn't watch The English Patient?
No. I have. There's a lot of movies I haven't seen, and that is just one of many, many, many. But yeah, it's a big one.
Isn't there a Seinfeld episode about someone who hasn't seen The English Patient, and the person, I think Elaine's boss, is really angry that she hasn't seen The English Patient and forces her, Elaine, you must watch The English Patient. And she's like, I don't want to watch The English Patient. But thematically, yeah, it made me think of
and it's referenced in here.
Ralph Fiennes crashing an airplane in the desert, getting all burned up like a little monster man.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's in here. So so let's start the top level. What was your take on this, going back into Fresán land?
It reminds me that the references that are in his books are things that I also typically really enjoy. So it's delightful to see somebody that enjoys it or writes about it in a way that's like, yeah, those are like the late night conversations I have with my friends. But I thought the introduction of this reminded me a lot of listening to Shine On Crazy Diamond, where it's kind of like, can we get to the song already? And it's like 15 minutes before the first vocal comes in, right? You get kind of like the whole suite of what the song is going to be like. You get an echoey guitar part. You get a couple of solos. And then it's finally, remembering you were young. I felt like reading all of those things, getting to part one, reading all of those things. It's like, oh, here comes the lyric. Finally, it's just like Shine On You Crazy Diamond.
Interesting. I thought, like, as an overture, this sets up like a lot of interesting things in terms of like, we could have used this last week instead of trying to remember shit from our own memory. This goes through almost all of the pieces we were trying to recall. And so many of them are like, oh, that's right. Like, no. So Penelope didn't burn down our sister of our lady or whatever, but it was Iris that isn't spelled like Iris. And then like a few other components that I was like, oh, that's right. But I also felt like this was the biggest, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a flag that he posts in the desert as to like what his style is. That this is what he's trying to do, is to have this whole trilogy was to create this moment where like he can remember and invent and dream, and it's unimpeded. And there's just option after option and repetition after repetition, to the point where he talks several times about warning like readers that he's created a voice. This voice can encompass all these things, and that they're not going to find what they want. If they want concision, that's writing. And he writes to read. He writes to continually have more information, more things. And on page 13, there's a very perfect one where he says, and he always thought that the idea behind these aesthetic stunts was to get the few readers he had, ever fewer, not to underline, but to cross out as they read, and to keep those items and options they liked best. The whole thing is a smorgasbord of like interesting viewpoints and ideas, which are going to repeat endlessly and like kind of circle over each other, sometimes accumulating, sometimes just being merely repetitive. But you get to choose the best phrasings, the best jokes, the ones that you want to latch onto. Like, how many times are cell phones going to be made fun of in this book? Like 1,000?
We can do a cell phone tracker and just keep it in the corner. Yeah.
Definitely could. And like, it will be hundreds for honestly, at least 100. And of those 100, there are bits that I think are like super funny, and ones where I'm like, oh, doing the cell phone thing again. And it is cool to think about the book or the style as being like, here's all of the digressions, here's all of the memories, here's all of the bits, and you can kind of, as a reader, you get to pick and choose what you want. As a writer, I'm not selecting anymore. I'm not a writer. I'm an ex-writer. Not the character is definitely not writing a book. They are writing essentially an anti-book.
Yeah, the one that I kind of latched onto with this section was this quote by Stephen King from Misery.
Oh yeah.
It says, "Art consists of the persistence of memory because writers remember everything, especially the hurts. Strip a writer to the buff, point to the scars, and he'll tell you the story of each small one. From the big ones, you get novels, not amnesia. A little talent is a nice thing to have if you want to be a writer, but the real requirement is the ability to remember the story of every scar."
Yep.
And I loved later on in this section where he talks about like the past is what you use to kind of cut open the present, and what bleeds, what spills out is the future, right? This idea of time, scars, remembering, and writing. I think that quote there for me, like, really beautifully kind of encapsulated what I was thinking about or really honing in on in this section.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that. We could talk. Well, let's table for a second, but we could talk about all the references, the book references and story references that are in here, because I think those are interesting. To give anyone a sort of framework, as best I can understand it, there are those two settings: the plane and the desert. There is the plane where he is flying home from or to somewhere, and the desert seems to be the desert in Mexico where Penelope found her green cow and her diamonds, which set her life apart. One thing we forgot to mention last week in relation to Penelope, his sister, is that she's a very famous writer and very popular writer, because she writes her stories of the tulpas that live on the moon and create everything. We didn't mention the tulpas at all, or like she's a writer at all, but she is. And then her kid, her son, who he refers to as her son of Penelope, then the son, never the nephew, but always like the one who cannot be named.
The one who shall not be named, yeah.
Yeah, and references later on that, like, if you were to name it, he would be sucked under the influence of the power of this son's life and existence. And so he doesn't even want to name it because it's too emotionally driving for him. But in the desert, so in the plane, he's like getting drunk, listening in on people. There's a moment where it almost feels like the plane has been what this whole trilogy has been, where he references like walking down the aisle and saying like, oh, now we can imagine there had been an invented part and a dream part, and that this stuff had really happened, but like blah, blah, blah. And remember, the end of invented part has the plane going back over. So there's this kind of like eternal return of being on the airplane and being in transit. The Mexican desert part, he's in the desert reading Ada or Ardor. God, I can't pronounce anything today. Ada or Ardor, and tearing the pages out and burning them one by one as he reads it, and quoting Nabokov's bits about memory. The funny part to that is that my second page fell out like immediately upon opening this book. And so I had an idea for a minute of just tearing the pages out of this book as I read it, but it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller as our weeks go
by. Mine did too.
God damn. Yep. Same one, the title page.
See, you shouldn't have gone with the wish.com glue. You should have gone go with the name brand glue, man.
Man, if I knew anything about how to bind books, I'd be employable. So those are the two kind of settings we have. And then, like you said, a lot of it revolves around this memory, about quotations about memory, about the way that memory works in terms of writing and reading, the idea of like reading things that you're writing, blah, 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 the Proustian stuff. There's lots of great quotes, but I don't know if there's anything else that, like, when you said like that's like the prelude and then the lyrics hit, I feel like it's still just the overture of like, here's all this stuff, and I don't know all the baggage. I don't even know that there's a song yet.
We're still getting the David Gilmour bend.
Yeah.
Guitar. Yeah.
I mean, what is the title of this? This part one is the books, the voices, the ghosts, the swimming pools, and the kind of things you only tell yourself when you're dreaming, you're awake and deserted and naked and flying and falling. That end sucks. My eyes are so bad. Speaking of that little footnote part with the American typewriter is impossible to read.
Yeah.
That is being reprinted for all of you out there who are over the age of 42. But anyways,
Sure,
so
it's a little faint, but I got through it okay.
it's a little tight. Like the leading and the kerning is off.
Sure.
That's what I think. It makes it look like unorganized, like a serial killer. Anyways, so I don't know where you want to start with things, but I do have a question for you right away.
Okay.
In terms of the other literatures that are referenced. So we have Otter Arter, obviously. Some of these are more evident than others, but one that's
Tender as the Night.
Tender as the Night.
Yeah.
Dracula, your Dracula stuff comes up in a few locations. But also I looked, Ray Langford actually wasn't bad. He had some good war some years. But the one that stood out to me is The Indian Uprising by Donald Barthelme.
I underlined that.
Have you read this recently?
No, I haven't.
I haven't either. I started reading it right now, like before you called in, so I didn't get very far. But it's from the version I have was in the New Yorker in March 6, 1965. And opens with like seemingly a battle of some sort. We defended the city as best we could. The arrows of Comanches came in clouds. The war clubs of the Comanches clattered on the soft yellow pavements. There were earthworks along the boulevard Mark Clark, and the hedges had been laced with sparkling wire. People are trying to understand. I spoke to Sylvia. Do you think this is a good life? The table held apples, books, long-playing records. She looked up. No. That's the first paragraph of it. But that was related. He referenced it in here. I assume that there's more to the story that relates to the novel, but I think he references it here in terms of like advice given to writers, where it's like write crazy, write whatever that phrase was, but be ready to, you gotta mean it.
Page 34, it's right here. Barthelme, who authorized his students to write in, quote, wacky mode, provided that it was clear to them that when and if they wrote like that, they also had the very level-headed obligation to their readers to, quote, break their hearts. Love it.
This story's going to break my heart, but
love it. That is such good advice.
Is that? Yeah, I was wondering about that as advice for you from a writer perspective.
I loved it. I think it's a fantastic idea. Yeah. Well, I mean, like the piece I'm working on now is in, quote, wacky mode, and I'm planning on wanting to have it be very like, when I told my wife the end of it, she was like, "You're going to do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Really?" "Yeah." She's like, "But it's so sad." And I'm like, "Yeah, it has to be."
Nice.
So yeah, when I saw this, I was like, "Oh, perfect." Like, I feel really good now, like charged to the finish. Let's go. There's also the advice here, the F. Scott Fitzgerald advice, writing advice in this earlier in that section as well, when we're in the water part, right? Because we have land, sea, and air, and then when talking about water, which I love the line about the beach being a deceptive desert that leads you to a place where you cannot drink. But there was the writing advice about like being underwater, and writing being like figuring it out while you're underwater.
Oh,
do you remember that?
I do remember that, but I don't know where that is right offhand.
Which is interesting, because the one I always think about with F. Scott Fitzgerald is, writing should be like pinning a love letter in a burning building.
Oh, right.
Right. We've heard that. We've all heard that one before, but yeah, I really liked that idea. It's like, oh, he also has a water writing advice, and there's also the fire writing advice if you wanted to go that that direction.
That's very true.
Yeah, super cool. I'll find it in a moment, but
I'll find it too. If we go through, so you can name some of the ones that are in here. We have, in terms of the literary references, on 14 is The English Patient, which you mentioned.
Hey!
With the quote, wait a second, when that, as he once read in the pages of a novel with a desert and a man on fire, was called blank, and described as, quote, the secret wind of the desert, because its name had been erased by a king after his son died within it. And now he's inside that same wind, so he can die and recover the name of he whose name must not be mentioned. Not his son exactly, but the closest thing he's ever had to a son. So the son is really like, if you know what's interesting, if you have like the Trinity too, We're in like the sun part of the Trinity, maybe.
Well, I don't know. If you're over the age of 43 and you want to try to do a Netflix and chill, definitely go with The English Patient. You're gonna get some bad grunting over 40 sex if you're ready. To The English Patient. It's so romantic, getting wild in the desert with a spy. I don't want to give away too much.
Literally my search history. Please stop.
No more.
One of the things I thought was interesting, and then going through this page by page now a little bit. But okay, so the obsession about parentheses is fun because that is part of what I think that.
Yeah,
really
I'll let you do the Thomas. You can do the Thomas Pynchon reference then. I'll leave that one for you.
Oh, that's right here, but that's not even like the one I'm thinking of, or even the one I was thinking of. But his parenthesis bit I think is interesting because I think it speaks to the all-encompassing nature of his style. Like when he's talking about the voice is those parentheticals where he can like comment upon the thing being written, and that sort of like second level of like, here's a novel, and then here's the parenthetical other voice that's sort of adding to and reflecting on that novel is his bicameral mind way of creating a consciousness in this text that goes beyond either one of those into something that like is talking back and forth to itself in a way. And like there is that struggle between wanting to write a novel about the son, about Penelope's son, his nephew, and how what's going to happen with that son, and then his endless urge to just go back to the past, to go back to the invention, to go back like one of the longer American Typewriter bits is about the intruders, which is about where he's living in Penelope's house, which is huge because she made all the money from the Tulpa books, and he's an insomniac, and the young writer who wants to be a filmmaker who's researching them creates like a weird like campsite ground, and it's like that long rant about like these people playing shitty music and singing and getting drunk, and they only have a hand that's like a Lego so it can accept another beer bottle in it where it can't move. Wonderful long bits. But I think
so what are the colors of the book titles? Because in this section too, he goes through the colors of green and yellow and right.
Our book colors are yellow is the first one, is the mentioned part.
Blue
is dreamed part, and then green looks more atomic, and nuclear is.
And bottom of the sky was not part of it, but that one was a blue one. Because I'm getting them confused.
Like sandy, but it's sandy because it's like reddish with a sandy top to it, so it looks a little desert like, or like a little Moroccan in a way. But that's not.
Yeah, I'm super slow to the party, but then I just realized, when he's going through the colors, he's talking about the books as well. And because I was thinking about that, how great that F. Scott Fitzgerald writing advice was about going under the water when it connects with the beach, going way back to the very beginning of the invented part, going under the water, their favorite author, their favorite book, like it all connects so perfectly. Like, I see what you're doing here. I like it. Okay.
On that same page on 19 where he's talking about parentheses, and there's that Pynchon quote from Inherent Vice. There's a bit that like stood out to me because it was like his style of foreshadowing or like giving you like a nugget is right in the middle where it says parentheses like a turbulence monster. Yes. References Twilight Zone as usual. And then no, his creature advancing along the wing is very different. His creature was a boy with flaming red hair astride an enormous white wild boar clad in steel and jade armor. And explanations regarding the origins of such a vision are forthcoming. Which, okay.
I wonder how many people know there's something on the wing, if they've seen that episode of Twilight Zone. Or not.
Isn't that the only one that everyone's seen? Is that like the first episode?
That I don't know. I don't think
so. It's not. I bet it's not. I bet there's something else. But I feel like that's the most known. Everyone's most aware of that particular episode. Maybe because we have like a fear of flying inherently in some level, and like that is like the real deep-seated fear. I don't know. But that's the one I know.
I mean, it's even one where like it's an Ace Ventura joke where he's opening and closing the shutter of the window, saying, "There's something on the wing. There's something on the wing."
Another movie I've never seen. I've never seen Ace Ventura. I hated Jim Carrey so much at that point in time. I thought he was like the ultimate downfall of American culture. I would tell everyone while I was in college that was true.
So there's the remake, right, of Twilight Zone, and that one was John Lithgow.
Was it?
Yeah, and so the original, though, I don't remember who the actor was for the original. I wish I did.
In that episode, not Ron
For
Serling.
the black and white one. Yeah, I'll
I
look it
do.
up. But
I'm going to save this as my favorite line. I'll save that for later. I'm looking for more of the references because we start getting vampires. So the intruders that he refers to as the people that are camping near his sister's house and are like
William Shatner, of course. I knew it was William Shatner, but I didn't want to like because it's the delivery of the line. There's something on the wing. Like he.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and
It's
there's also the reference here to Esperanto. So it's like, okay, full circle. Let's go.
There's also a reference I just saw as I was flipping through that talks about, the air that everyone was breathing that was surely rife with traces of ash from increasingly frequent volcanic eruptions. On my way there.
There you go.
On my way there. Every volcano in that country is overdue for an explosion, so I might be trapped.
Can you watch The Northman on your way there? I mean, it's kind of must watch at this point.
Everyone keeps talking about that, and I kind of don't want to, just because like I don't. You're the third person that's brought it up, and I'm sort of like, maybe I should wait. I don't know. Maybe I can. I'll see if I can download it.
I just love the studio, whatever studio idea it was, to give a very artsy, slow burn director, give him $90 million. Yeah, we'll get that money back. I'm sure. This is gonna be a box office hit. What a terrible idea. I love it.
Like we've heard about Babylon, where it's like this is the last time this guy will ever make a movie because they're just like here's a bunch of too much money for you to go fuck it all up.
I got to the point where the elephant shit on the person. I was like, I don't know if this movie's going to be for me just right now. I'm not really in the mood for this.
I have to say again, stop looking through my search history, but elephant shitting on people is kind of a go-to. Like now that I know that, I'm down. I know what I am downloading. Here's the line that I was looking for. Back in his seat, it's as if it never happened, as if he hadn't heard anything while walking through the aisle of the airplane, and that allowed him to convince himself that he had invented or dreamed all of it. Like, I don't think that's referencing like the conversations, but it also feels like a metonymy for like this whole kind of structure of what he was talking about. Thrice told tales. Here's Ada, now in the desert with all the airplanes of his past flying overhead. He feeds a small fire one page at a time from a book he'd never been able to read, though he tried to use so many times and had so often referred to their author as one of his favorites beyond his first few chapters. And we know for a fact that Rodrigo has never finished, or at the time that we did this, he never finished Ada.
Well, he's going to die if he does. So
right,
you cannot. I have a friend that has that with War and Peace. He had a heart attack while reading War and Peace, and it was on his chest on his way into the hospital, and they left it by his bedside as he's recovering from, and he was looking at it, and he was like one chapter away from finishing. Is like, absolutely not.
Oh my God.
it's a sign I cannot finish this book. So he's close, but wow. will not finish it.
That is terrifying. I've started adopting the attitude though that I'm just like, on my way to my first heart attack. Like this is my life up till my first heart attack. I'm gonna get things in order so that can happen, and then I can like, it's like a chrysalis moment. Like I'm gonna go through the first heart attack and into a new self. It's going to be wonderful. I just got to, make it to that first heart attack first. So we're talking, there's a lot of lines I like in here. Like the one about coincidences, I think is great. One of the reasons that coincidences exist is so that you can say that coincidences don't exist, he thinks, which I think is wonderful. But the next author that pops up starts to pull in your Dracula stuff, which I hope you really are reading Dracula so that you can fill us in, because I'm not going to have time for that. But Jules Verne is referenced because he likes titles that aren't the thing themselves, that are like point to like something that you don't know what's going to be behind the door. Like, I don't know, like the invented part, the remembered part. Like these are not descriptive. These not like the girl on the train. This is like something like I sat outside a Grand Station and wept. Like there's no like, it's like very, evocative. And so he represents 20 Leagues Under the Sea, Around the World in 80 Days, and then says, he really liked Verne's formidable and vampiric and mechanical Carpathian Castle, which he read before Dracula and The Invention of Morel. I never put Dracula and Invention of Morel together. Like I've read Invention of Morel years and years ago, a couple times, but I'm curious about that connection. But I like the that sort of mixing of like Ardor that's nobody's read and like is a dense, the longest novel by Nabokov, and then you get like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which we all know in one way or another, Journey to the Center of the Earth, which we may never read, but we all kind of get.
Yeah.
That or 80 around the world in 80 days. That's right.
I love it when writers are very clever and they do a new rendition of H.G. Wells' Time Machine. You know, there's the people above and there's the people below, and the people above don't like. Whoa, dude, like it's like everything ever. If we're gonna be really clever with this one, watch.
Oh man. Okay, see that who's next in this. There's a lot of quotes from Nabokov in here. Where's the boy? Looking if there's anything else. Oh, there's one other like foreshadowing part that so he has his little demon thing that explanations will be forthcoming. Oh, this is one other thing we forgot to mention. So when he talks about the mobile phones, one of the reasons that the character hates phones so much is that he called and turned in his parents who are going to be staging a demonstration that led to their death. Do you remember that his sister was going to like call the hotline and he does it instead? And he's like, I wish there was a device where I could reach them and warn them ahead of time. And there isn't one, but there is then eventually, and that's part of his secret for it. Here's another on page 46 and 47 have two of my favorite things. 46 has like the prelude. There he stays looking, or the foreshadowing, looking at everything through the magnifying and lidless eye of the telescopic scope of a rifle. And where did you get that rifle that wasn't here a second ago come from? Like that part's fun. But then there's the bit on 47, I think this is where maybe the hard overture starts to end, where he's basically like, there should be a frequency, like the frequency they add to the end of the Beatles album that has like the dog whistle that no one else can hear. He's like, there should be a frequency within my writing telling these people before the outset that they've come to the wrong place if they're looking for like characters that they can, where is it? If they're seeking something full of dialogue and characters to effortlessly identify with, whose days and actions begin well and ended better. He's waving his arms not so he'd be rescued, but to keep them from being pulled under, telling them before setting out and at the outset that they come to the wrong place, making dissuasive gestures so they'd continue on their way and not lose heart, because surely they would soon find what they were looking for elsewhere, somewhere else, anywhere else. There's so many books like that, books that weren't like his or like the book he was now burning page by page, and so many other places, books to feel happy and represented and at peace in, listening to heroes and heroines who conversed a lot and kissed and made love even more. And then the line by itself, but you won't find any of that here in Bon Voyage. I think it's like that's maybe the crescendo moment of the overture of like, here's my style, here's the thing, here's a bunch of pieces. Oh, get on the boat, fucking bye. Good luck to you.
I was laughing so much reading this part. I mean,
Me too.
All of the airplane stuff was amazing.
Oh,
absolutely incredible.
There's a great bit about the idea of prophets too. That I love. It's just it's like overflowing with ideas and concepts and quotes and everything. And that's kind of like the best aspect of his writing. But on 52 is the one. If you remember everything, you don't forget anything. The future will be incredibly predictable, transparent, obvious, entirely banal, and absolutely legible. Prophets aren't writers, but readers who can read what people want to believe and then repeat it back to them, dressing it up as if it were their own creation. Love it. Love it. All these, there's so many references to the recounted part, the part that recounts and recount was already been recounted, invented. All that trilogy type stuff shows up over and over and over again.
Yeah, and 2001: A Space Odyssey is very heavy in this so far, and this as well. Which I'd really like a little more 2010, because I think that's probably the better film. I feel like really Arthur C. Clarke took back control of his work, and you get to see that in 2010. So I'm hoping we can have a little bit more Roy Schneider. Helen Mirren is in that. I want a little more Helen Mirren, a little more Roy Schneider.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more. So I was looking, I found a bunch of the literary references I want to bring up in a second. But before we get there, 55 is one metaphor about writing that I wanted to ask you your take on. So
sure.
First, and to begin with the title was like the airplane, somewhere to climb aboard so that everything could begin to climb. Next and immediately thereafter, back when he still wrote, back when he still had something to tell, came the flight crew. And only then did he, the passenger, come aboard, sitting down and fastening his seatbelt, and sinking his claws in that little glass bottle the flight stewardess offered him, along with the headphones and eye mask, blah, 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 blah. But as a metaphor for writing like a book, the plane, the crew, the passenger, does that metaphor mean anything or work in any way for you?
Sure.
That's a no.
The title was like the airplane, somewhere to climb aboard so that everything could begin to climb. All right, that makes sense. Like, what am I getting into, right? Like, it's like you said earlier before, like 20,000 leagues under the sea. All right, that's my vehicle. Got it, right? Next, and immediately thereafter, back when he still wrote, back when he still had something to tell, came the flight crew. So, all right, you get on board, you're going to go someplace, and here comes the people that are going to like serve you, make you comfortable, direct you, help you, show you where everything's at. Hey, you know, right?
All like the characters and bits and pieces, ideas. They're all on this plane.
Yeah. And only then did he, the passenger, come aboard, sitting down and fastening his seatbelt, and sinking his claws into that little glass bottle flight attendants offered him, along with the headphones, the eye mask, and a little scented towel to wash his hands, stained with the ink from answering absurd questions. So it sounds like too. Then, like this artist is kind of like, it's that discovery method of writing where you're along for the ride. I think on that one, which is what I like. I don't typically like to. I like to have a general idea of what I'm getting into and what I want to do, but I like to discover it along with the reader. It's sometimes the best way to delight and surprise is if you discover it yourself. Obviously, your reader's going to discover it as well. Whereas if it's mapped out and you know exactly, before you even enter the vehicle, if you already have the flight figured out and then you get on, like it's boring, it's dull, it's predictable, it's IKEA.
Yeah, it's IKEA. That with all the instructions. That last paragraph that kind of burgeons balloons and sort of like trails off is like kind of like the consciousness of the writer. Like you have all these pieces, but like the style, the voice, the observation, if you had the same plane, same crew, but two passengers, they're gonna tell that story differently.
Sure.
And his is like this, grabbing epigraphs, so on and so forth. The next one that I saw is like the next page took me a half a second, I suppose. 57, that the quote is from Salinger, but it's got like a nice rundown here of the worst thing that being an artist could do to you would be that it would make you slightly unhappy constantly, which I love. But then down below, it's like, it refers to his books that kept on selling, Fakes and Phonies, Centenarian and the Rye. Like that one gets referenced as to like who it is.
I don't know, between Salinger being a pedophile and Burroughs murdering his wife. I mean, I just don't know about these references. If this is something that's palatable for me to. What do we have next? Dr. Seuss? I mean, really? Enemies. List of enemies.
Salinger.
No, it's so delightful. It's really delightful too, because obviously that's a callback because there's Salinger is earlier in it as well. So to return to it, that's
absolutely the one that it took me a minute to figure out was 60. 60 is Pavise. The dream is the creation of the intelligence, creator being present, not knowing how it will end. All the above is jotted down by a writer, another writer in his diary. Writer committed suicide so that, though he didn't know it at the time, he, many years later, could add him to his collection of crystalline and spherical epigraphs. Suicidal writer he'd only read one book by, the book from which he'd extracted those random quotes. So that's Pavise, and that gets referred to later as well when he talks about where is it? It's a little bit further on. Yeah, this section is long. Oh, there's one other thing I want to bring up for sure. But he references Malcolm Lowry's book, Strange Comfort Afforded by the Profession, and being in Rome as well at Keats's house and looking at all the books that Keats owned. read and like writing about that. So that then refers back to the Fise, back to this kind of collection of epigraphs and of references. Like all of his chords are being struck here in terms of like what he values in writing and in like what telling. The one thing that I noticed this time, I mean, it's been a couple years, so I don't have the problem that I had when I first read this, where we had literally just finished the dream part, and I went right into this, and it was like overwhelming, and I don't remember it well enough to like not be surprised. But one of the things that showed up a lot that I started marking was like how many times it has the word wind. The word wind is in here so many times, including like the reference to the song, the Nina Simone and David Bowie song. It's just like I have it like highlighted over and over again in the last half of this, which is wind, 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 wind. Which I think is also like, I mean, it's kind of cool because he references the desert and the desert winds and the sort of like things blowing, but like that is kind of I think that's kind of a telling like word that he's choosing to use over and over.
Yeah. Speaking of wind and airplanes, I heard recently, I don't know why, it's stupid YouTube algorithm. Sometimes it just gives you a gem. And it was the old wrestler Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And somebody asked him, hey, can you tell me an Andre the Giant story? People love Andre the Giant stories because why not? It's a giant.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, okay, I'll tell you a story. I remember we were flying back from Tokyo. All right. So it's a 14-hour flight, 16-hour flight. And the problem with Andre is he's about, 7'1", and at the time he was 550, almost 600 pounds. And so if you can imagine, he doesn't fit into the bathroom on an airplane. So he had this whole protocol he would do where he would, cleanse his body out of all of his waste so that he could go on an airplane and not have to use the bathroom. Well, something wasn't right in Japan. He was backed up really bad. It didn't work right or whatever. He gets on the airplane. So they're flying high above the friendly skies. And Andre, in his big booming voice, says, I've got to go to the bathroom. And they're like, Andre, you can't, dude. Like, what are we going to do? He's like, nope, I got to go to the bathroom. I just think it's wonderful on an airplane, and ask a story about Andre. This is what you remember is the wind of your butthole, basically. That's your fond remembrance of him in the skies. So what they do is they take him back to like the galley area where those cart things are. This is on a 747, past all the aisles of the bathrooms, and they take giant trash bags and make like a trough for him to go back into. And so they shut the curtains, and so he begins to defecate. And some of the other wrestlers were back there near him, and they're just cracking up and laughing because of one, like how like apparently the sound of his flatulence are very legendary because it's from a literal giant. It's from a literal monster of a man.
This is a shit from the podcast.
Yeah. And so that happens. And then he's like saying, I'm not even kidding you. This man is 600 pounds. He's probably defecating up to like 20 pounds. Like he fills up an entire, well, they would say like minimum after a show, he would drink 24 cans of beer just to get started, and probably 5 to 6 bottles of wine. Like
Start.
And so what happens is, so he's doing all of that, and they're losing themselves at how funny this situation is. And poor Andre obviously is not this isn't very fun for him. But then the smell makes it out of that area. And this is the back of the airplane. So it's the smoking section, and people start gagging and throwing up in their mouths, and they're fleeing the back of it. And so there's this mass exodus, this wave of people that are just like crawling over each other, getting out of their seats as fast as they can, like they're trying to get out of a
zombie movie.
And the pilot's coming back, asking what's going on. He's getting upset, and like it's a literal shit show because of Andre the Giant coming back from on an airplane. And then like he has a story with like, yeah, he was just a great man. It was like, wait, that's what you remember of this great man? It's just him shitting on an airplane? That's all you have? What in the world?
You didn't even reference the Beckett connection? Like,
yeah, come on. He's French. You could do Beckett. You could.
Wow. That is wild.
Yep.
They should, yeah. Now I was like logistically like, well, he should only take flights that are like 4 hours. He could just like
No, he was a world attraction. Like he was like, looking at King Kong or something, right? You want
from
to
Japan to like Philippines to like blank to blank. Make it slow.
take a cruise liner next time, Andre.
Cruise liner. Can't fit in those bathrooms either, but you can go over the side. Maybe.
All right.
Okay, no more defecation talk. You have
That's enough. I just thought with the remembered part and airplanes, and then somebody's telling a story, it fit perfectly for this.
That better not happen on my plate today, buddy. So for next week, we're going up through page 143, which is still in this first part of this particular volume. But before then, what do you have a favorite? Oh, one that we didn't mention, Proust is in here a shitload too. Dracula's referenced, but Proust is in here a bunch of times, like both directly, and then there's even like a reference to the sonata that exists only in Search of Lost Time. It's not a real piece of music. And nope, I just found something, but that's not it. And so that's another writer that's referenced. That's going to be like obviously like a rubric or token for this whole thing. And do you have a favorite line?
I do. It ties in and connects beautifully with that Stephen King. A little talent is a nice thing to have if you want to be a writer, but the real requirement is the ability to remember the story of every scar. So on page 20, parentheses like slashes and cuts, like interruptions and interferences. And it was William S. Burroughs who said that when you cut into the present, the future leaks out. Sure, maybe, but he would add the scalpel that cuts those curving slits, those parentheses, that scalpel is the past.
Wow. Yeah, I like that a lot. Mine is on 25. Love doesn't have a precise formula or exact composition, and who knows to what order it belongs. We can only venture that love is the effect of a cause. Love, which in the end, but from the beginning, always was and is and will be self-love. Because to really love yourself, you need to fall in love with another person and make them fall in love with you and pass through them. And on the other side, find the ideal version of yourself.
Nice.
So like, just generally. So good start. Heavy book. Lots going on. Next week, 60 pages. I'll be in Iceland. We'll figure out the timing and let everyone know that watches this live on our YouTube channel what time it'll be taking place and day and whatnot. My schedule is a little more than confusing at this moment, and I'm not so accustomed to what the time difference will be, but we will figure it out and we'll let you know. And until then, you can like and subscribe, rate us at iTunes or whatever it's called now, podcasts, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your information. The books are available, all 3 volumes of the trilogy, for $40 if you go to openletter.org or openletter.com and find it. There's listed there as the trilogy for sale. Other than that, any final thoughts?
Helen Mirren makes a great cosmonaut. Roy Schneider for the win.
Oh, actually, that's one last thing I want to add that ties into that. Sorry, not to let your beat land, but the place that NASA trained astronauts to go on the moon landing was Iceland. So when he kept referencing like the moon stuff in the desert and all that, I could not connect that with this trip where we'll be seeing like those fields, that area.
Perfect, though.
Lunar landscape. Helen Mirren, cosmonauts.